Welcome to the Deep Dive. We give you the clearest insights, basically the ultimate shortcut to getting up to speed.
Yeah.
And today we are jumping right into one of the biggest machines on television right now. We're talking about the sprawling, interconnected world of the FBI franchise.
All thanks to Dick Wolf, of course.
The king of the procedural, absolutely.
It's a whole ecosystem he's built, especially on Tuesday nights.
Yeah.
And what's so wild isn't just, how many shows there are, but how fast it all happened. He took his classic template, the fast-paced investigation, the big manhunts, and just wove it all together.
And not just within the FBI shows, he connected it all the way back to Law and Order and the Chicago universe.
Exactly.
So for you, our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're going to map out the history of all the FBI shows. We're going to look at how those big crossovers actually work. And we're going to place it all inside that giant wolfverse.
But we're also going to ground it in reality.
That's the key part. We're going to compare the fiction to the facts, the real structure of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, its mission, and, some of its more complicated, controversial history.
Yeah, we've been digging through everything from show guides and news reports to actual Department of Justice documents.
There's a lot to unpack, so let's get started.
Let's do it.
Okay, to really get this, we have to start at the beginning with the flagship show. The original FBI premiered on CBS, back in September 2018?
That's right.
And it felt different right away. It wasn't quite like CSI or even his other Law and Order shows. What was the big strategic move there?
Well, the shift was, I think, subtle, but really smart from a business perspective. Most procedurals are about local tops, right? Street level stuff, or maybe a military unit like NCIS.
Sure.
FBI just immediately raised the stakes. It focused on this small, elite team of agents out of the New York field office, 26 Federal Plaza. A really high-profile spot.
Which means the cases are automatically bigger.
Way bigger. You're dealing with federal crimes from day one, terrorism, massive organized crime rings, kidnappings that cross state lines. The jurisdiction is wider, and the whole pace just feels faster. And
what's really interesting looking at it now is how the show was almost like a stealth reunion for actors from his other shows. He was planting those continuity seeds right from the start.
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge head start. You immediately had two major actors from Law and Order in these really critical senior roles.
Right, Jeremy Sisto.
Jeremy Sisto, who was on L&O, he comes in as Assistant Special Agent in Charge Jubal Valentine. And Alana De La Garza, another familiar face in that universe, she's the big boss. Special Agent in Charge, Isabel Castile.
Having them in charge just gives the whole thing instant weight,
It really does. And of course, you had a huge star like Sayla Ward in that first season, which helped a lot.
But beyond just, recycling familiar actors, the casting also did something culturally significant, which you don't always see in a big network show like this.
That's a great point. They cast Zico Zaki, who is an Egyptian-born actor, as the lead agent, Omar Adam Away Zidane.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, Hollywood has, a pretty bad history of casting Middle Eastern actors as, the bad guys. Usually terrorists or villains.
Sure, it was a stereotype for a long time.
So for Dick Wolf and CBS to make him the hero, the dedicated face of the Bureau, that was a really big deal. It set a more modern, more aware tone for the whole franchise right out of the gate.
And that launch was a huge hit, right? Which in the Dick Wolf playbook means only one thing.
Expansion. Fast.
Exactly. Success means you replicate it. And it only took, 2 years before we got the first spinoff?
Yep, FBI, Most Wanted, which started in 2020. And this one immediately carved out its own niche. It introduced the Fugitive Task Force.
So a different kind of team.
A totally different mission. They're an elite mobile unit that only goes after the most violent criminals on the FBI's Most Wanted list. They're constantly on the road.
And for anyone trying to, track the strategy here, the way they launched Most Wanted is classic Dick Wolf. It wasn't just a new episode one day.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
He used a trick he's perfected over the years. The backdoor pilot.
Explain that.
It's simple, and it's really effective. You introduce the new characters and the whole concept for the new show inside an episode of the parent show, the one that's already a hit.
Right.
So Most Wanted was actually introduced in season 1 of FBI. It was episode 18, and it was even called Most Wanted.
That guarantees you an audience right away. People are already watching
Exactly. The audience gets the tone, they meet the new team, and the whole thing feels connected from the jump.
And tonally, Most Wanted felt different. It was darker, wasn't it?
Oh, definitely darker.
Yeah.
And that's by design. The main FBI show balances these big federal cases with, the office politics and dynamics at the New York headquarters. Most Wanted is just relentless.
It's all manhunt.
All manhunt, all the
Yeah.
time. Cross-country chases, tracking down truly awful people. The pace is different. The whole vibe is just grittier.
And then, just a year later, in 2021, he took the biggest leap yet. He took the franchise global with FBI. International.
That was the boldest move, for sure. It completely changed the scope. Suddenly you have this team, the International Fly Team, based in Europe.
So they're dealing with cases where Americans are in trouble overseas.
Right, or when international criminals are a threat to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the launch was a signature Wolf event.
The big crossover.
A massive 3-episode crossover. The story started on FBI, continued on Most Wanted, and the third hour was the actual pilot for FBI International.
By that point, the FBI block on CBS was just a monster.
It was a force. But, we should probably mention that things are changing. It's been confirmed recently that both Most Wanted and International are actually ending in 2025.
So after 6 seasons for Most Wanted and 4 for International.
Right. And that might sound like it's winding down, but it's not. The expansion is just shifting.
This is where you see the wolf machine in action again. They're not just sticking to law enforcement. They're moving into intelligence.
Yep. The new CBS series, CIA, is explicitly a spin-off from the FBI franchise. It's set to start in 2025.
Which is a really interesting move. And as we'll get into later, that creates some pretty challenging crossover potential, given how different the real FBI and CIA actually operate.
It's fascinating, though. He uses the cancellation of 2 shows to fuel the launch of an even bigger idea. It's like the template itself is the product, not any one show.
So we've got these 3 shows, soon to be 4 with CIA, all happening in the same timeline. For anyone trying to watch on streaming, that can get confusing, especially since they all aired on the same night.
Oh, it's a huge topic of debate for dedicated fans. The sources really break it down into 2 main ways you can watch.
Okay, what's method 1?
Method 1 is the simple way, the binge watcher's friend. You just watch all of FBI, then you watch all of Most Wanted, then all of International. It's clean. It's easy.
But it's not how it was meant to be seen, right? If you want the most factual representation, as the showrunners intended, you have to do it differently.
You have to. You have to follow the air date order. That means you watch, say, episode 4 of FBI, then episode 4 of Most Wanted, then episode 4 of International, all based on when they originally broadcast.
And that's especially important for those huge crossover events.
It's essential because you'll have one single story like they're tracking a huge terrorist threat that starts on FBI. Then the case gets handed to the Fugitive Task Force on Most Wanted. And it all wraps up with the flight team overseas on International. If you don't watch them in order on the same night, you lose the whole flow of the story.
Just thinking about the logistics of that, coordinating 3 production teams for one story on one night, that sounds like a producer's nightmare.
Well, and the sources say some crossovers are way easier to do than others purely because of geography.
Right.
The main FBI show and Most Wanted crossover all the time. And the reason is simple. They're both set in New York and they film in the same area.
So it's easy to share actors, sets, whatever.
Exactly. If an agent from the task force needs to pop into headquarters to talk to Isabel Castile, it's just a quick scene change. No big deal.
But FBI, International, that's the big challenge.
It's a huge logistical hurdle. That show is based and filmed entirely in Europe. Places like Budapest, Portugal, Rome.
Which the actors probably love.
Sure.
Yeah.
One of the showrunners called it delightful catnip for the actors. But trying to get the New York team, the mobile team, and the Europe team all in the same place at the same time to work one case, that's an international production puzzle.
So those giant 3-part crossovers are rarer, but the universe still feels connected because the characters, right?
Yeah.
The senior people pop up everywhere.
They do. Asaki Jubal Valentine and Asaki Isabel Castile, they're like the command center for the whole franchise. They make these cameo appearances on the spin-offs to give intel, offer guidance, or just make sure everything's being done by the book. It keeps HQ in the loop.
And you also see people actually moving between the shows, which really sells the idea of it being one big agency. There was that transfer in season 5 of Most Wanted, right? With Nina Chase.
Yeah, and that's where the show rewards the real diehard fans. It wasn't just a random transfer. For people who watch all the shows, you know that Nina Chase is married to Agent Stuart Scola on the main FBI show.
So it adds this whole personal layer to it.
It adds depth, but it also highlights a key point.
Yeah.
Each show can still stand on its own. You can jump into Most Wanted and enjoy the manhunts without knowing every character's backstory. But if you are paying attention, the links are there.
Okay, before we move on, we have to talk about the the meta-continuity problem, the actor crossover phenomenon.
Yes. This is a classic side effect of the Wolfverse. When you're running this many shows, you're bound to start recycling your favorite actors. And the most striking recent example is Dylan McDermott.
Okay, so he comes in to lead FBI Most Wanted.
Right. He takes over as team leader Remy Scott after the original lead Jess LaCroix was killed off in season 3. Yeah. A big dramatic entrance.
But if you watch the other side of the Wolf Empire, this was really confusing.
Incredibly confusing. Because McDermott was already a huge, memorable character in the Law & Order universe. He played Richard Wheatley on Organized Crime.
The main villain.
A brilliant, ruthless, and, incredibly charismatic crime boss. He was the primary antagonist for Elliot Stabler for a long time.
So to suddenly see that same actor, who you just saw as this master criminal, now playing the heroic, noble leader of an FBI task force.
It creates some serious cognitive dissonance for the audience. It's almost like the producers are admitting that, yeah, the universe is connected, but a great actor is more important than perfect continuity.
It's basically Dick Wolf saying, we know he's great, just go with it.
Exactly. And it's this kind of delightful, weird moment that longtime fans have sort of learned to accept. It's part of the fun.
That Dylan McDermott example is actually a perfect bridge because as impressive as the FBI franchise is, it's really just one piece of the giant puzzle Dick Wolf has built. This is where we have to zoom out and look at the whole megaverse.
The scale of it is it's hard to even comprehend. And it all comes from this master plan he put into action around the 2021-2022 TV season. It's what everyone calls the trilogy night strategy.
Right. He basically claimed 3 entire nights of network television.
He did. FBI got Tuesdays on CBS with the 3 shows running back-to-back. The Chicago franchise got Wednesdays on NBC Med, Fire, and PD. And then Law & Order took Thursdays on NBC with the original revival, SVU, and Organized Crime.
Think about that. The 9 hours of primetime scripted drama from one producer across 2 major networks. It's totally unprecedented.
It's an economic fortress. If one show falters, the whole structure doesn't collapse.
And all of it, of course, grew out of the original empire. Law & Order, the history there is what makes all these connections possible.
The original Law & Order ran from 1990 to 2010. Then it got revived in 2022. And when it came back, it officially passed Gunsmoke to become the longest-running dramatic show in American TV history.
Which just proves that original ripped-from-the-headlines format is basically timeless.
It is. But then its spin-off, SVU, went and broke even more records.
Special Victims Unit started in '99, right?
Yep, and it's the single longest-running scripted primetime drama ever, period. As of September 2024, it's aired 551 episodes.
Wow!
Which means it finally passed the original Law & Order's episode count. The original's at 501 now after the revival.
So through that massive history, with all the spin-offs like Criminal Intent, Trial by Jury, we find the threads that tie Law & Order, Chicago, and now FBI into one single massive universe.
Right. And you might be asking, okay, how do we actually know that the FBI show in New York is in the same reality as, say, Chicago Fire?
We have the receipts.
We have the receipts. First, the original FBI series had an official on-screen crossover with Chicago PD. That's a direct link.
Okay.
And then you have the really deep connections between Law & Order and Chicago. There was a character, 88 Peter Stone, who was on SVU in the spin-off Justice.
Yeah.
He then physically appeared in the Chicago universe, confirming they share the same legal reality.
But if we're looking for the one single thread that ties almost everything together, it's one character.
It's Detective John Munch. This is the deepest cut in the entire Wolfverse.
This is where it gets really fun for TV nerds.
It does.
Yeah.
Because the character of Detective John Munch, played by Richard Belzer, didn't even start on a Dick Wolf show. He originated on the amazing drama Homicide, Life on the Street.
On a different network.
Right. He was on Homicide for 122 episodes. When that show ended, the character literally just moved over and joined the main cast of Law & Order. SVU in 1999.
Okay, so that connects Homicide to Law & Order.
Right. And since SVU has crossed over with the Chicago shows, and the Chicago shows have crossed over with FBI.
Wow. So John Munch is the bridge that connects 4 separate major franchises.
Homicide to Law & Order to Chicago to FBI. It's like 6 degrees of John Munch. It's the ultimate proof that it's all one big shared reality.
Which even implies that his other older shows are part of it, too.
Absolutely. The sources point out that shows he co-created, like New York Undercover and Deadline, were implicitly part of this world. You'd see the same fictional newspaper, the New York Ledger, pop up in different shows.
And even a shared character, right? Dr. Olivet.
Dr. Elizabeth Olivet, the psychiatrist who was all over Law & Order, she also appeared on New York Undercover. So it's not just the cops, it's the whole professional infrastructure of the city.
Which is just a brilliant way to build a world, and it all comes back to leveraging the actors. Let's just quickly revisit the franchise hoppers.
It's smart. We already mentioned Alana Del Garza. She was AD Connie Ruverosa on Law & Order, and now she's SAC Isabel Castile on FBI.
And Jeremy Sisto, SAC Jubal Valentine, also from the original Law & Order.
But the undisputed champion of franchise hopping has to be Dan Florak.
Captain Cragen.
Captain Donald Cragen. He was on the original Law & Order, left in 1993. Then he comes back in 1999 as an original cast member on SVU, stays for years, and then he guest starred on Organized Crime as recently as 2024.
His career basically traces the history of the entire universe.
It does. And having these characters with such long histories is what gives the whole thing this feeling of being, real and continuous. Yeah. Even if the logistics of it all don't quite make sense, it's a very effective illusion.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time in the fictional world, but the whole reason these FBI shows work, the reason we're hooked, is because they borrow the credibility of the real Federal Bureau of Investigation. So let's talk about that. What is the real FBI?
We have to start with the basic definition. The FBI is the United States Domestic Intelligence and Security Service. But, and this is a key point, it's also the country's main federal law enforcement agency.
It works under the Department of Justice.
Exactly, under the DOJ. It's part of the intelligence community, but its authority comes from law enforcement. And that's what makes it totally different from, say, the CIA, which has no law enforcement power at all.
So their jurisdiction is just massive compared to local police.
It's huge. They cover more than 200 categories of federal crimes. But they're strategic. They focus on the big, complex, long-term cases that cross state lines. Terrorism, espionage, major financial crime.
They're not investigating every bank robbery?
No. They leave that to local police unless they're specifically asked for help or if it's on federal property.
And to manage all that, the organization itself has to be huge and spread out.
It's fundamentally a field-oriented organization. The leadership is at the J. Edgar Hoover building in D.C., but the real work happens in the field offices.
How many are there?
There are 56 main field offices in big cities across the country. And the main FBI show is, correctly set at the New York office at 26 Federal Plaza.
Okay.
But then under those 56 big offices, there are about 400 smaller satellite offices, what they call resident agencies.
Wow, 400. That's way more than I would have thought.
It's a massive footprint. And in terms of people, it's not just a handful of agents in a room like on TV.
Right.
According to DOJ archives, the Bureau has around 10,100 special agents. Those are the people we see on the show. But they're supported by almost 14,000 other employees, analysts, technicians, administrative staff. There's a huge machine behind every single agent.
And the sources lay out their main jobs, their historical investigative programs.
Yep, there are 7 big ones, according to the DOJ data. Things like civil rights, organized crime and drugs, violent crimes, financial crime, and then the 2 big national security ones, counterterrorism and foreign counterintelligence.
Which is what the shows are almost always about.
Exactly. The shows reflect that post-9/11 shift in priorities.
And that detail brings us to the biggest difference between the shows and reality, which is FBI, International.
This is where the show takes the most dramatic license. The series has this cool, independent fly team doing raids and making arrests all over Europe.
That's not how it works.
Not even close. The real FBI operates overseas through what they call legal attaché offices, or legates.
Okay, so what is a legate office?
Think of them less as a SWAT team and more as diplomats for the DOJ. The Bureau has about 60 of these offices around the world. And their main job is not kicking down doors, it's liaison and information exchange.
So they're building relationships.
They're building relationships with foreign police and intelligence services. Their job is to make sure information flows smoothly, especially on terrorism and criminal cases that cross borders. But they are guests in that country.
And that's the key distinction the show has to ignore for the action to work.
It's the crucial distinction. A real FBI legate office does not, under any circumstances, conduct unilateral operations in a host country. The FBI only investigates abroad if they are formally invited by that country's government.
So they have no power to just go make an arrest?
None. They have to rely entirely on their international partners to gather evidence and make arrests on their behalf, or in cooperation with them. The kind of raids you see on FBI. International would cause a massive diplomatic incident in the real world. The real work is much slower and involves a lot more paperwork.
I never really thought about it that way. The show takes the most exciting part of the job, the action, and just pastes it into the most constrained diplomatic part of their real operations.
It gives you the drama we want to see, but the reality is much more about building trust.
So now that we've sort of grounded the show in the real structure of the Bureau, we have to talk about the fact that the real FBI is not this, flawless organization. It has a really complex and sometimes painful history.
And fictional shows, just by their nature, have to kind of smooth over those rough edges to keep the heroic story going.
But for anyone who wants the full picture, that context is essential.
It is. The Bureau's history, especially under J. Edgar Hoover, is tangled up with some major controversies, usually involving government power being used against its own citizens.
Let's start with the most famous one, COINTELPRO.
Right, the counterintelligence program. It ran for years, and its stated goal was to disrupt political organizations inside the U.S. that the FBI considered dissident.
This was basically institutionalized surveillance.
It was. And they targeted groups all over the political spectrum. But the really shocking part for many people was the targeting of mainstream nonviolent groups.
Like the civil rights movement.
Exactly. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s organization, was a specific target of COINTELPRO. The FBI actively tried to discredit him. And that history of the Bureau interfering in protected political activity, it created this deep, lasting distrust.
And beyond those political operations, there have been some major, high-profile tactical failures.
Yeah, you can point to some tragic standoffs in the 90s where the FBI's actions were heavily criticized. The Ruby Ridge incident in 1992, the Waco siege in 1993, those events sparked huge public debates about the use of force by federal agencies.
And there were also cases of actual corruption, like the Whitey Bulger scandal in Boston.
That case was just devastating for the Bureau's reputation. Whitey Bulger was a monster, a notorious gangster, but the Boston field office basically let him run wild for years, committing murder because he was giving them information on the mafia.
He was an informant.
An informant who was being protected. When that all came out, it just shattered public trust.
And a case a lot of people will remember is the Richard Jewell case.
That was a huge moment. Yeah. During the 1996 Olympic Park bombing, the FBI was criticized for leaking Richard Jewell's name to the media, basically naming him as the prime suspect when he was innocent. The media destroyed his life, and it highlighted the danger of federal agencies rushing to judgment.
And more recently, there's been a lot of debate around certain investigative tactics, like entrapment.
That's a really contentious issue.
Yeah.
Civil liberties groups like the ACLU and Human Rights Watch have criticized the Bureau for using undercover agents or agent provocateurs to essentially coax people into committing crimes they might not have otherwise.
The argument being that they're manufacturing crimes rather than stopping them.
Right. And critics say these stings often target people who are impoverished or have mental health issues. It's a very blurry line.
And then there's the issue of surveillance, which exploded after 9/11.
Well, surveillance has always been a tool for the Bureau. But after 2010, civil liberties groups started pointing out that a disproportionate amount of resources seemed to be going towards monitoring left-leaning political groups, which raised all sorts of First Amendment concerns.
So if you take all of this, the surveillance, the standoffs, the corruption, it paints a picture of an agency that's constantly having to evolve. And that brings us back to the shows.
It does. Because the whole focus of the real FBI changed completely after the 1998 embassy bombings in Africa. After that, the Bureau totally reorganized its priorities.
They created a new tier system.
A three-tiered system.
Yeah.
And counterterrorism and foreign counterintelligence were put in Tier 1, the absolute highest priority.
And that permanently changed the Bureau.
It changed everything. Resources, money, people. It all flooded into preventing terror attacks. And that massive real-world shift is exactly why the FBI franchise we watch today is so focused on national security. The fiction is a perfect reflection of the Bureau's post-9/11 reality.
What a journey. I mean, we started with just one show, the original FBI, back in 2018. We saw how Dick Wolf used that success to build an entire night of TV on CBS with Most Wanted and International.
And we mapped out how the universe is hardwired into the bigger Law & Order and Chicago worlds. We saw the actor swapping, the crossovers, and of course, the ultimate link. Detective John Munch, who connects 4 different franchises.
And Maybe most importantly, we grounded all that fiction in the reality of the FBI. We learned how the real bureau works with its 56 field offices and massive support staff. And we saw how the show takes huge liberties, especially with its international operations, where real legates are diplomats, not tactical operators.
Yeah, I think in the end, the popularity of this whole franchise comes from that tension. It gives us the drama and the heroic speed of solving a case. But it's all built on the foundation of a real-world agency that has real constraints and, a lot of historical baggage. It gives us a sense of order.
Which brings us to our final thought, something for you to think about. Dick Wolf is doing it again. He's launching CIA, and it's explicitly connected to the FBI franchise.
And we just spent time talking about how different they are in the real world. The FBI is law enforcement, DOJ. The CIA is foreign intelligence, no law enforcement power.
That exact division, that inability for the two to share information effectively, was one of the biggest criticisms from the 9/11 Commission. It was seen as a massive institutional failure.
So the question is, how does a fictional TV universe handle that? How does it merge two agencies that, in reality, have often been at odds? Does it just ignore that friction for the sake of a good story? Or will it actually try to tackle that real-world tension head-on?
It's a really interesting problem. They're essentially trying to simplify a huge real-world national security challenge for the sake of a shared universe. Something to think about next time you see an FBI agent and a CIA operative in the same room on TV. Thanks for diving deep with us.